We're celebrating 25 years of joy with you. Good afternoon to you. Welcome to the market, please. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. We are coming up today. UK Trade Commissioner to Africa promises continued strengthening of trade partnership with Ghana. Also coming up, Malta to open aviation route in Ghana this year. We have the details shortly. And as we mark Ghana Month this March, we throw the spotlight on the history of the banking industry in Ghana. We bring you details of all these stories plus more in this edition of the Marketplace. I'll be right back with the details. Hello again, welcome back to the Marketplace. Now, the UK Trade Commissioner to Africa, Emma Wade-Smith, says her country will continue to strengthen its trade partnership with Ghana. She believes sustainability, investment, knowledge and technology transfer will dominate the relationship between the two parties. Trade between the two countries is worth about £1.4 billion sterling and is seen as fairly well balanced when it comes to exports. Following the recent investment summit, UK is initiating the program to enable Ghanaian companies to export more to the country and beyond. There's more in this report. Unilever Ghana, established several decades ago, was born out of UK-Ghana relationship. The company has over the years churned out several food, home and personal care retail products across the country. The UK Trade Commissioner to Africa, Emma Smith, lauded Unilever for bringing innovation, skills and technology to its workforce. She was speaking to the media after a tour of Unilever's premises in Tema.
But it's about sustainability in its broadest sense. So really embracing the local workforce, supporting, upskilling, empowering Ghanaians working here in this factory and on this site. And I think for me it speaks to the very heart of what business partnership is all about. So UK and Ghana coming together to create an extraordinary factory here, which has been here for many decades, and innovating and bringing in technology and bringing in that innovation and skills from the people who work here. I think that is really powerful. So the fact that Unilever has been here for so many years, I think really speaks to the sustainability of this business model, the fact that they continue to innovate, that they are putting sustainability and workforce engagement at the heart of that vision, I think really again speaks to the values and the principles that underpin both British and Ghanaian business here. So I think it's a terrific model.
Unilever Ghana Limited says it will invest millions of euros to increase efficiency, quality of its products and create more employment. Managing Director of the company, George Owusu-Ansah, says Unilever will continue to use international production standards. According to him, the issue of sustainability remains a priority.
We are very strong on our code, and what we do through our association with being part of a multinational, is to make sure that we don't do in Ghana what would not be done elsewhere. So in Ghana, we live Unilever here like Unilever will live anywhere else in the world. Then it's the thing we do around sustainability. And sustainability for us is very, very important because, as I said in my opening remarks, this enterprise is about humanity. It's about people and it's about the environment we live in. I believe these things we do make us an attraction for association, not just by envoys and visitors, but by even the Ghanaian people, because we have been in Ghana for many decades, and in our time here, we have received the support and the patronage of Ghanaians.
Emma Smith was presented with a beautiful piece of kente cloth. Kwame Yanka's report for Joy Business. Meanwhile, the European Union is committing to continued partnership with Ghana in the fight against climate change and its impact on the environment. A parliamentary delegation says it is satisfied at the country's efforts at dealing with the phenomenon and commends government. Head of the team, Norbert Neuser, spoke with JoyNews on a visit to Kumasi. Ohimin Teria has more in this report.
The EU recently launched the European Green Deal, a growth strategy to make member countries climate neutral by 2050 to improve well-being of people. The all-inclusive project is aimed at protecting natural habitat, planets and economy. A 5-member EU Parliament team was in Ghana over the weekend to assess Ghana's programs towards mitigating climate change impact. The delegation, made up mainly of Committee of Development, has interacted with officials at the Forestry Commission as well as Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. Members also visited plantation sites and sawmills as part of Ghana Usual Voluntary Partnership Agreement Program. Head of delegation Norman Neza tells Joy News, Ghana has a responsibility to reduce the burden of climate change.
I think we have to work together in the fight of climate change. We have started just now new in Europe with a new commission, and the main target is called Green Deal. So in many fields of politics we are looking what we can do to tackle this difficult issue of climate change. And the countries like Ghana, they have their own responsibility, and I think Ghana in this regard is a flagship how to work sustainable.
The team was impressed about the Youth in Afforestation program, for which the Forestry Commission engaged over 60,000 youth for 3 plantations. According to Mr. Neza, the fact-finding usual team is satisfied at what it has witnessed, promising stronger partnerships with Ghana.
We did know about it, but it's always good to go on the ground and to see how it's really working. That was the reason we went today to the coca plantage and now to this timber factory. Ghana is doing a very good job. The government is committed to it, and we could really see results on the ground. So we want to work together, that we together can tackle climate change. And it's important that Ghana is one of the leading countries in Africa going on to manage it.
From Kumasi for Joy News, I'm Interior reporting.
Now, there are ongoing discussions between the government of Malta and Ghana's Aviation Ministry and the Ghana Investment Promotion Center for Malta to explore business opportunities in the vibrant business in Ghana. Chief Executive of the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, Yofi Grant, says the discussions will present an opportunity for Malta to introduce direct flight to Ghana as well as other air haulage activities to facilitate businesses in both countries with easy accessibility. Yofi Grant made the disclosure to Joy Business after he signed bilateral business agreements with Malta at the Ghana-Malta Business Forum here in Accra. There's more in this report.
The decision to enter Ghana's aviation industry is part of Malta's efforts at opening up key sectors of its economy to the world. Per the ongoing discussions, Malta will be given the opportunity to venture into airline operations, logistics and transportation in the country's aviation space due to Ghana's strategic business climate in the sub-Saharan Africa region. According to Yofi Grant, both countries will benefit from the deal if it finally goes through.
To clearly understand what the business opportunity is, then of course what the regulatory frameworks will be, whether it's a fifth rights airspace rights or whether it's actually a flight that comes to Accra directly and then from Accra goes into the sub-region or uses Accra as a transit point. And either ways, whether we can actually have flights go to Malta as a transit point into Europe. So all that is there. But also in terms of business, the fact that Malta has opened its first sub-Saharan African embassy or high commission in Accra also tells that they are serious about opening up opportunities. So issues like visa, etc., can be issued by the Maltese embassy here.
On his part, Minister of Economy, Investment and Small Businesses of Malta, Silvio Shembri, believes that Ghana stands out among African countries, hence the decision to use Ghana in entering the African markets.
Well, again, this is another common thing we have in common. We are both regional hubs in our respective areas. Malta in North Africa and Europe, especially Southern Europe, Ghana in West Africa. Again, we both need each other. It's a win-win situation here. We can help each other. There's also complementarity at the sectoral level. In many industry sectors, we are non-competing. We actually can help each other. And there are very few countries in which we have this situation. We can help each other.
The occasion was used to sign 5 agreements between selected agencies in Ghana and Malta.
The month of March is being celebrated as Ghana Month here, and we are celebrating our culture that makes us unique people and also personalities who make the nation proud. One such personality is Solomon Quainoo, who has made history by becoming the first Ghanaian pilot to fly the world's biggest passenger aircraft, Airbus 380, from Dubai to Accra. It's been a little over a year since he attained that feat on Emirates. Captain Quainoo has been speaking to Joy Business about that experience and what it means for a Ghanaian pilot to work with the Middle East's largest airline, Emirates.
A lot more goes on in the cockpit than you can imagine, thinking about all sort of scenarios, looking at alternates in case maybe a passenger is unwell, what do we do? And so we think about all these things. We look at the weather systems ahead and plan all the time, and making contingency plans and alternatives to make the flight very smooth and comfortable for the passengers.
What's been your most memorable flight?
It goes without saying, the Accra flight. Yeah, that is one that's...
How did you feel when you went to land?
At that time, it was, as I said, the professionalism, staying focused, make sure that we achieve the task ahead. And after landing and we vacated the runway onto the taxiway, I gave control of the aircraft to my colleague, my first officer, and I couldn't hold back the tears. I was just crying. I was just crying. I was full of tears, seeing all the people waiting, waving, dancing, drumming, and shouting. It was just unbelievable.
What was it like being a Ghanaian working for Emirates? Can you tell us?
Emirates treats every nationality the same. If you are professional and do your job as they train us to do, you are the same as everybody else. And being a Ghanaian and working with Emirates among so many different cultures, it's an experience one cannot get easily, because you learn so many cultures at first hand. You know, every flight I do, sometimes I have about 20 nations, nationalities working with me, and you learn so many things, and it helps you improve yourself and become a better professional and a better person.
So we're still celebrating the month of March as Ghana Month. Now, the business of banking in Ghana can be traced to the colonial era in the then Gold Coast. This period saw the provision of financial services to many British enterprises and the colonial administration. In 1896, the first bank to open a branch in Accra was the Bank of British West Africa, which later became Standard Chartered Bank. Since then, the face of banking in the colonial and post-colonial era has undergone some drastic changes. What can history tell us as we celebrate Ghana Man? Philip Namfuri will walk us through some history of the banking sector. Philip, give us a chronology of this.
So, like you rightly mentioned, Standard Chartered First Bank, 1896.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Formerly known as British?
Yeah, Bank of British West Africa.
Okay.
So their orientation at that time, with their predisposition, was to service the local industries. Then, as time went on, 1896, Standard Chartered Bank came. Then, in 1916, Barclays Bank also came. At that time, it was called Colonial Bank. So at that time,
So those were the two countries, the two banks
Those
in
were
the
the only two banks in the Gold Coast at that time. And for the longest time, these were the only two banks that were existing in Ghana. So Standard Chartered, Barclays Bank. And you know now Barclays is ABSA in Ghana and then Africa. They still maintain their Barclays brand in the UK.
All right.
So the business of banking, like we said, traced back to the colonial era. Banks existed to serve British enterprises and the colonial administration. That's one. Then 1896, we had the first bank, that's Standard Chartered. Then we had 1918, Colonial Bank began operations in the Gold Coast. Then at that time, they realized that, you know what, it was only these two banks that were operating, Standard Chartered, Barclays Bank. Then people started agitating. Then we established what we have today as GCB. So that's Ghana Commercial Bank. Was the third bank to be established in this country in 1953. Then
that was just before independence.
Just before independence. Then out of GCB, we carved out the Bank of Ghana, or Bank of Ghana, let's say, was established on its own also in 1957. It was established 2 days just before independence. So Bank of Ghana's birthday is actually 4th March 1957. So Standard Chartered, then from Standard Chartered, we moved to Barclays Bank. Then from Barclays Bank, we moved to Ghana Commercial Bank. Then we moved to the Bank of Ghana in 1957. So at that time, just at independence, more or less, let's call it 4 banks. Then after independence, there was a drive to create more banks focused on the Ghanaian enterprises also.
All right.
Then after that, Nkrumah's agitation to ramp up the financial sector saw the establishment of some banks. So we had Agricultural Development Bank, as we can see here, 1965. We also had NIB in 1963. All these were what we call development finance institutions or development banks.
Okay. Now, so what were the peculiar issues at that time? Because, you know, every now and then we have the focus of banks. At that time, post-colonial or pre-colonial era, what was the focus?
So pre-colonial era, I beg your pardon, was to service only the British enterprises. You and I were excluded from the system. So there was agitation, and then they realized that, you know what, we need local banks. We need banks that can focus on not only British enterprises, but the Ghanaians also in the Gold Coast at that time. So that was the drive at that time.
So does it mean that at that time, not many Ghanaians had bank accounts, so to speak?
You may have a bank account, but it will be with the foreign institutions. So the banking sector at that time was foreign dominated. As was the debate in the recent banking sector cleanup when people were complaining that our banks are the banking industry is being taken over by the foreign entities. At that time, just these 2 banks were operating. Then as time went on, Nkrumah brought these new development finance institutions. Then in the 80s and the 90s, we had the introduction of privately owned commercial banks. So we talk about your Cow Bank, we talk about Eco Bank, the Trust Bank, which was acquired by Cow Bank. We had Meridian Bank, which was also in 1995 acquired by the Social Security and National Insurance Trust at that time. Then we also had the Metropolitan and Allied Bank, which has also been over time more or less acquired by another institution. Banks such as Home Finance Company, HFC, which is now Republic Bank, were all in the system at that time.
Okay, so each of these banks had a focus, a special area that it was actually...
So in that time, from colonial era up to when we introduced the universal banking license, somewhere in 2004, banks were operating on 3 lines. Either you're a development bank, you're a merchants bank, or you're a commercial bank. So you focus your industry. Then with time, after the passage of this new banking act, the one that introduced a universal banking license, all the banks said that you can play in any space you want to play. But if you look at this, for example, so you see the colonial era, limited banking services, the banks were controlled from London. What were the constraints at that time? Exclusion, agitation. Then we came to Nkrumah's time, right after independence. State-owned control banks, development banking, interest rate ceilings and sector credit ceilings. They were trying to stimulate growth. So you find that banks can't lend above a certain limit or can't give loans to a certain sector beyond a certain limit. That led to what we call financial repression, a very fancy name that describes the chaos and the mess we created in the system at that time. Then we came down into the structural adjustment era. That was when Ghana experienced its own economic crisis, and then the World Bank, etc., came inside, and we had to change.
During the PNDC regime.
Exactly. Then we brought in the Financial Sector Adjustment Program, FinSAP, which was broken down into Financial Sector Adjustment Credit 1 and 2. These more or less established what we have today as some of the modern foundations of banking. So, for example, the establishment of the National Banking College came as a result of this FinSAC 2. Then we have the FinSEP 1 and then FinSEP 2. I'll leave this for now. But this is basically a snapshot of what Ghana's banking sector was like. We can find a write-up I put together on my joyonline/business in the course of the day. So if viewers are interested, they can check it out. But it just gives you an idea that the banking sector has changed. Evolved over time. And this current 2017 to date has been one of the biggest shake-ups we've had in the industry. Banks have collapsed, banks have closed over time. But this one that we're seeing today, I think for me,
so within this period, I mean, have we learned any lessons? Are there any lessons, peculiar lessons that can be learned or that can be attributed to, I mean, as the industry continues to evolve?
Very good one. So, state-owned banks are good, but we need to learn from them. You see, at that time, a lot of the banks were state-owned, limited private-owned banks, or even no private-owned banks. And we saw the chaos it created. At some point, almost all of these banks almost went down. They were in some crisis whatsoever. So for one, I would say state-owned banks are good, but we must ensure that they are run properly like the private-owned banks. Not to suggest that private-owned banks can't collapse, but you know the influences a state-owned bank will bring to the banking space. People will not follow due process in taking credits, etc. So for us, I would say reducing the state's ownership in banks in the country is good. And now you see that international institutions, IMF, World Bank, have been advocating for a reduction in holdings of equity by government in banks. And you see that now there are very few government-owned banks, apart from CBG being 100% owned by the banks. Very few, most of them are privately owned banks. Yeah.
All right, so before we take a break, one interesting question that keeps bothering my mind. Why are we now still pursuing a financial inclusion agenda? Why didn't we, at that time, imbibe that conscience into the people to know that banking is a necessity?
Okay. So we did it at some point. If you look at this somewhere, you realize that there is the NBFI project, non-bank financial institutions project, that brought together savings and loans, microfinance institutions, etc. These were supposed to target people who were excluded from the financial system. But we've seen the effects of it in Ghana today. You've seen the mess the microfinance, microcredit issues have created. So these are what I was saying.
Corporate governance lapses?
Exactly. So these are learning curves. We have to continue. It's not a one-day affair. We have to continue with these as time goes on and learn from mistakes as we've done.
So from here, what's the way, when do you think, or where do you think we are heading to?
Okay, we're heading to a stronger banking sector, but it hinges upon our ability to ensure that the right things are done and we don't repeat mistakes of the recent crisis that we had from 2017 to date. Just make sure that all is well and good in the system.
Thank you very much, Philip Namfuri. And of course, it's all part of the Ghana month, celebrating the month of March as Ghana month. We're taking a short break on the marketplace. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back. Now, the Registrar General, Jemima Owari, says her outfit can only proceed with payment of locked-up investments after a court clearance is given. Some aggrieved customers of 53 collapsed fund management companies have petitioned government to treat all victims of the banking sector cleanup equally by paying locked-up investments. They questioned government's silence over their fate after committing to pay those of savings and loans companies, including DKM Financial Services, which collapsed in 2015. According to the Registrar General, who is also the receiver for the fund management firms, post-banking sector litigation has impeded the payment process.
For the fund management companies, you know that the Securities and Exchange Commission's Act cannot appoint me as a liquidator straight away as the Bank of Ghana Act did. So I am now having to petition the High Court to be given an order to liquidate them. That is what has taken time. If those orders had been given, I'm sure it would be easier for government to pay them as well. But as long as I haven't gotten the order to liquidate them, who is going to pay them? I have to pay them. So I'd advise that they do not put too much of, litigious in the courts, because at the end of the day, your license has been withdrawn. You can't continue as a fund manager. You have your investors crying out there for their funds. And so if even we pay it up front, I will liquidate the assets and pay the rest of the money back to government. So government is just doing us a favor. It's not free money. No, we'll have to pay back. With DKM, every asset I've liquidated, I'll give the money back to government. So if they allow the process to quickly go through and we get the order, to be easier for everybody, because now I can see the fund management, they are so sad because they are not getting anything.
Also, just before we conclude the marketplace today, we've been asking whether you think the newly introduced management system at the various ports of entry is good or is not necessary. We've been asking this question on our Facebook poll, and this is the outcome of the polls now. 18% of the voters are saying it's a good system, so we should maintain it, and 82% says it is not necessary. All right, that's it for the marketplace. Many thanks for your company. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. Have a good afternoon.